Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm extremely excited to be joined by Christian from Christian's Court, and we're going to be talking about a few different things in the tennis world. Christian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for being on. I think definitely long-awaited chat, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who watch my channel that watch yours as well, and hopefully vice versa. But
Mhm.
that check out the content, so I think it'll be one for definitely the communities to get stuck into. So I guess the first thing we can touch upon is one of the biggest topics in the tennis world right now, which is the Sinner case. And I know you've done your research on it as well, and it's clearly a very pressing topic right now. And there's differing views from lots of different outlets and people, media, ex players, current players, of course. And it seems to be a real hot topic. And who knows exactly what's right, what's wrong, what's happened, what hasn't. But like from your point of view, how do you see it from your view, and like how do you think it's going to play out, and like what's your opinion on what should potentially happen as well?
Yeah. So I kind of thought that everything would be past us, especially after Center One, I guess, won the case, and that was revealed in August. I know WADA said that they were, open to appealing, but I honestly didn't think that they would appeal. I don't know why I didn't think so, but the news recently came out that the World Anti-Doping Agency went ahead and appealed that case, and they're not challenging the fact that there was no performance enhancing effect because the doctors, and that's kind of the general consensus, that the Clostebol, I believe that's the name of the steroid cream, it basically had no performance enhancing effect on Center. What WADA is basically challenging is the fact that not the fact, but the question of whether Center truly had like no negligence of the contamination. We all know that Center, his argument was that his physiotherapist had the cream and used it for a cut on his finger, and then I guess his argument was that it was a contamination from his finger to Center's body. And Center's argument was that he basically did whatever he could to prevent that from even happening, as he kind of asked Naldi if he had used any cream. That's what I read on multiple sources, and apparently Naldi said that he didn't apply any like bad creams to his finger, but unfortunately he did, and it was contamination. So yes, it's really interesting. They're asking for a 1 to 2 year ban. I personally think that that's way too much when you consider other cases or contamination cases, like for example, Diana Yastremska. She had a contamination case back in 2021, and she was sidelined for a total of like 6 months. And then Sarah Rane, she initially got a 2 month ban from her mother's cancer drug, I believe, somehow getting into the family dinner, but that was increased to 10 months. So I don't think if Center ultimately loses the case and like loses the appeal and he has to be sat out for a few months, I don't think it'll be 1 to 2 years. I think at most maybe like 6 to 9 months. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting development in the story.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think a lot of people thought, as you did as well, that it was put to bed after they had a tribunal. The ITA were saying, look, he's been cleared, he's not been negligent, and he's fine to play. And then seems like WADA is saying, hold on, you guys are not doing your due diligence properly, and we want to appeal it because we don't think you've handled it in the correct way. And
Mhm.
then there's been a lot of noise from current players, I would say, more than even ex players, about the way that the Sinner case has been dealt with. Some players feel like there's been preferential treatment towards Sinner, and also the fact that he hasn't got a ban, and they're citing other players, like, which I think are different cases, like, because you mentioned a few that are similar or very similar in that case in contamination, but other cases that are a bit different in terms of the actual case. But players like Tyrone Moore and I guess Nicholas Jarry as well. Smoila Halep is very different, but again, another case that people are talking about. So from your point of view, do you think it's fair that you know they cleared him, or the fact that actually you were saying maybe 6 to 9 months, but you feel like that's the maximum, right? Given what's actually occurred.
Yeah, yeah, like I said, like judging from other cases, I find it very hard to believe that they would sideline a Jannik center for more than a year. It just doesn't seem likely. And then I also think the fact that too that center has already won. This case has been brought to like courts or whatever 3 times, and he won all 3 previous hearings or trials, whatever else. So I think that that bodes better in his favor, knowing that he already had those wins. So once again, like even if he does face a ban, I don't expect it to be for a significant amount of time.
Yeah, I agree. And so, do you think he shouldn't be banned at all, or do you think like 6 months? Like, what's your view on it? What do you think would be a justifiable outcome?
See, this is very sticky and messy because normally when like you initially get like a ban or a notice that you failed a drug test, you're immediately banned. With Center, he was able to kind of continue competing and he didn't really face an actual suspension. He was provisionally suspended for twice on 2 separate occasions, but those days accumulated to like 5 days total. And during those days where he was banned, there were no tournaments going on. So you could argue that he really didn't face any punishment. Yes, his Indian Wells points were removed, as well as his rank prize money, but that's honestly like nothing compared to actually missing out on multiple tournaments. So I honestly wouldn't be totally like, it's just like, once again, I said it's messy because you let him play all this time and then now you're going to ban him like so many months after that initial positive test. So it's definitely going to cause a lot of havoc if he is forced to be sidelined, especially from his fans. But I honestly feel like if I were to say that he should be banned or something, and if we're trying to keep it fair, I'd say perhaps honestly like 2 to 4 months, maybe, because of just how late it is, if at all. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a tricky one because they've cleared him of wrongdoing, and then WADA are coming in, but they're saying that what's actually come out of it, the explanation is fine, but it's the actual outcome that the consequence of those actions isn't what they think is fitting. But yeah, I agree that I think 1 to 2 years seems potentially excessive. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a couple of months maybe, and that probably take him to the end of the year, for example. That's not really too bad. Like, he wouldn't miss a slam, and even if he were to miss a slam, say if it was 4 months, he'd probably just miss the Aussie Open, which would be one. So I don't think it's going to have a massive effect on this. Well, I don't think it would have a massive effect in the scheme of things. But my question actually for you is, what do you think, in terms of from the outside looking in, like how bad is this for tennis? Like, for people that are looking in, do you think this is a real stain on the sport? Not the fact that Sinner tested positive, but the way everything's been handled, right? Just the whole noise around it. Like, do you think it's been like? Do you think it's now going to put tennis in a negative light going forward?
It's definitely not the best look, and I feel like it's more or less on, I guess, the governing bodies of tennis that'll look worse on. For example, the ITIA. I guess, yeah, basically the ITIA doesn't look great on them as well. It's just overall just very shaky, and with these types of cases, it could be months or even years before the final decision is even made. So it could come at an awkward point, like literally maybe mid tournament of a grand slam. So you never know exactly what could happen. And if that happens, it'll even be a worse PR nightmare for, I guess, those governing bodies in tennis as a whole. But yeah, it's very kind of unprecedented for sure that this is happening. But I don't think it'll be like too um horrible on, I guess, the overall tennis realm for sure. Obviously, you would hate for Sinner to be banned, and it's a top player. So you want all your top players in the tournament as much as possible, as many tournaments as possible. So you never want these type of things to happen. But overall, I don't feel like it'll be too bad of a stain on tennis as a whole. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting. I heard Medvedev's comments after his match in Beijing, and they asked him about it, and he said that he was in a similar boat to Carlos Alcaraz, and that he sympathizes with Sinner, and that he realizes that it is a bit of a messy situation, as you mentioned earlier. And I think his words were, because he was asked whether this is going to put a stain on the sport. I'm paraphrasing. It's not, that's probably not exactly what was said, but along those lines. And his response was that because it's an isolated incident, it's just one player. He doesn't think it is. It's isolated. He doesn't think it's it's not rife, for example, in tennis. And he said if it was the fact that it was all 10 of the top 10 players tested positive for the same substance, then he would say, fine, okay, that's why that there's a reason for tennis and people outside of tennis looking in to say, look, there's something like systemically wrong in the sport of tennis, right? So there's corruption going on, people are doping, people are taking performance enhancing drugs, and then you get into how for example cycling was the Lance Armstrong, and everyone's cheating and everyone's trying to gain an edge, but he was saying, look, it's just one incident. So until someone can prove otherwise, that it's consistent across tennis, or there's a group of players, for example, doing it, then actually it shouldn't have that much of a negative impact. So I'm going to stick with him. He seems like a very smart man, and when I spoke to him at Wimbledon, he was one of my favorites, and he seems to be very intelligent. So I'm happy to stick in his corner and say, okay, I agree. But I do think that the longer it does drag out, the actual outcome of this appeal, I think the worse it does get. Just because it'd be good if we got a resolution. It's already been dragged out because he tested positive, in March, and then now we're in September, 6 months later. It might take another 6 months for an outcome. That's going to be a whole year. As you said, it gets dragged out as well because it takes time. There's lots of procedure involved, and it would be good if they just were able to get through it quickly. That's not always the case, and there's a lot of red tape involved. But I do feel like there's just going to be a cloud around him until it is solved. And I think actually what's been quite impressive from him is the fact that he has clearly not let it mentally affect him, whereas I would imagine a lot of players it would have. And put aside your feelings of whether you're a Sinner fan or not, or whether you think he should be banned or not. But if you just take the fact that he's playing with this down mental load, right, that he didn't have before, knowing that, okay, I could be banned or I've just been tested positive, what people talk, like what people saying about me, he's getting asked about it all the time in presses, and he's managed to actually compartmentalize that and then get onto court and still win. He's won 2 Grand Slams this year, and he is playing some really, really good tennis as well in the Asian swing. So that's been really impressive, I think, and probably shows a real impressive, I think, mental toughness that maybe a lot of other players wouldn't have. So at least you have to say kudos to him in that sense. So look, I mean, I just hope it gets resolved. And in terms of a justifiable outcome, I think I'm similar to what you were saying. I think in thinking that either, look, if they've said he's fine to play, then let him play. But if they want to be consistent, which they should be consistent, either they need to say, well, if we're not going to ban you, then we need to look at the rulings and then adjust that accordingly going forward because they've set a new precedent, or then they say, fine, we should ban you, but for maybe 2 months, whatever, 3-4 months, that might be in line with what they've done in the past, and then keep it consistent. Because I think the whole uproar from current players especially is that they haven't been consistent as well. Can you kind of sympathize with the current players, like on their thoughts? Or what were your thoughts when you saw the comments from your Shapovalovs and the Kyrgioses, for example? Like, did you think, oh, actually they're being a little bit, they're kind of really running with it and they're trying to add fuel to the fire and they don't necessarily have a point? Or do you think, oh, actually I can see what they're doing and why they're saying it and they have a point?
I definitely think I more sympathize with Shapovalov's point. I low-key kind of struggle to take Nick Kyrgios's thoughts seriously because of how he's gone so hard at center vehemently. I know Kyrgios said that center should be banned for 2 years. I think that's very extreme. But bottom line, I do understand what players are saying as far as that most cases with contamination, players are banned for at least months. I especially sympathize with, as you mentioned earlier, Tara Moore. She was sidelined for at least over a year and a half with no resolution to her case. And it hit her harder because she is lower ranked and she needs money to play. Like, she relies on tennis. She can't rely on sponsorships to compete. So for sure. And then I think I saw that she tweeted about there potentially being conflicts of interest too, as far as like people being concerned. I mean, I'm involved with like the Court of Arbitration for Sport and things like that nature. That's a whole other discussion. But overall, I for sure see their complaints. I do think once again it's just very sticky because now you've already let him play and win a whole major title, and then now you're going to, if they do even end up suspending him for a time, then you're going to suspend him. And then I also think the timing of when, hypothetically, if he is suspended, the timing of that like month ban is also important too. But then one thing I mentioned also in my video talking about the matter is that it could also, in a weird way, work in Sinner's favor if he does face some type of suspension, because at least then it would be less of a cloud hanging on to him, and he can honestly kind of assume more of like a, for lack of a better word, victim role, or not mentality, as far as like, instead of him being, oh, special privilege, now he got the punishment. So I think people might get off his case a little bit more about that. But bottom line, I doubt that he cares too much about what other people think. He'd much rather play and compete on the tour. But yeah, like overall, it's just very, very complicated and intriguing, this whole case.
Yeah, I agree. It's very interesting, and that's a really very intriguing point that you made. That you think that actually, if he serves a ban, then potentially he could come out of it in a positive way, because it kind of lets go of that mental load he's carrying with him, and the fact that people might be saying, "Oh, there's an asterisk by this tournament because actually we don't know whether you're doing X, Y, and Z," and he can say, "Well, hold on, I've done my time. I suspended for whatever 2, 3, 4 months, and then actually I've come back, and I was cleared before, so they've appealed it, and I've done my time, and then now you guys can't say anything to me." And I'm, as you said, maybe playing the victim a little bit, or maybe not victim, but maybe that he's saying, well, there's no reason now to bring it up, right? You've done your time, you served your ban, done, and there's nothing else to talk about. And I think, for example, one of the Ima brothers, he served a ban, right, for missing, I think it was 3 drugs tested. Is if you miss 3, then you get banned. And he's come back now. He initially said he's going to retire, then he came back, and you don't really hear people mentioning that, right? When he's playing, and I mean, he's not as high profile as Sinner, and I get that, but I do think, and I actually agree with your point, the more I think about it, that if he were to serve some type of suspension, it probably would then be in his rearview mirror. He doesn't need to then address it anymore. Whereas I feel like it might be one of those things that people mention in the future, and it's maybe associated with him, especially, for example, if someone else then tests positive and they are then banned, then I feel like it looks worse on him as well, because then people say, well, hold on, this guy's been banned, but then just a year ago, for example, with Sinner, why wasn't he banned? So then it gets into that whole point of, are they giving him special treatment, which is not great for him. And he obviously doesn't want to be associated with that. He wants to be associated with, look, I've come out, I'm clean, and I'm winning my tournaments fair and square, and there's nothing that you guys can say about it. So yeah, it's a very, very sticky situation, I think, the more we talk about it, but interesting to see which way it goes. And I'm very also interested to see how the rest of the players react as well to the outcome, no matter what it is, because clearly there are some very divisive opinions. And it's always interesting to see, because sometimes there's certain matters that majority of the players are very united on, and I feel like that there are some issues like scheduling, for example. They tend to be really united on that majority of players saying that the schedule's too packed, or the late finishes, for example. But this specific case, I feel like it's almost been 50-50. Some players are very much in the corner of saying he's innocent, he couldn't have done it, and actually we're fine with the fact that he's still playing. And others are saying no, like it's not fair. Nothing against Sinner, but we don't think it's consistent. So that there's been that. There hasn't been many in between, actually, who have said, oh, I'm not sure about it. People that have come out and talked, they've been very, very, I think, strong in their opinion. So interesting to see for sure. What are you actually? I mean, on the Sinner case, is there anything else you want to mention before we move on to something else?
I guess I'll kind of want to move to something that's similar to center. I know you talked about Simona Halep earlier, and I know she's planning on coming back finally. She made her comeback initially in Miami earlier this year, but she's been dealing with, I believe, injury problems. But she'll be returning this week for the Hong Kong 125 tournament. And I kind of didn't do as much research like after the case dropped, because I just feel like that case had like a so much just nuance wrapped into it and just technicalities and things like that. And that was another divisive thing. I feel like Simona got more love overall, a little bit more love, because I guess a lot of the blame was shifted onto her former coach, Patrick Mouratoglou, who his team was, I guess, responsible for giving the contaminated collagen to Halep. But then I see other people talking about, like, I made a tweet about it today, and someone came in my replies talking about Patrick was more of like a red herring, and that there was something deeper going on. And I know there's also issue with her athlete biological passport. So with my bringing that up is like, where do we go as far as like how we perceive Simona Halep? Like, was she a victim of like a long, arduous, drawn out process, and also as well as like contamination, or is there something deeper going on that we didn't? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why it's always really difficult, because even with the Sinner case, a lot of people were coming out initially when it happened saying, oh, we think he did it, or we don't think he did it. And, it's difficult because, in our positions as well, I think you have to be careful because we don't really know, right? Like, unless you're in the team and you've been there, you don't really know what's happened. So I feel like you just have to assume that whatever's being said is the truth, and that's it, and move forward. And if you've got lingering thoughts in the back of your head, then fine. But that's just the way it is. But with the Simone Halep one, for example, it's interesting that people are saying that because maybe there was something else at play. Who knows? And but until she comes out and she says specifically, this is what I think happened, for example, this is what happened, then it's difficult. If it's a case of she's saying something and Patrick saying something, then you can choose. But I feel like if there's only one version of the truth, and that's the version you have to run with, right, for now. And it's interesting. But her case is also very interesting. We could probably talk about that for a long time. But I mean, interesting to see that she's back now again, and obviously she came back, and then there was a bit of a false start, injured, etc., and now she's back again. But she was a great champion, and it still is. So interesting to see if she can make some waves. And talking of comebacks as well, actually, and I know you're a big fan of hers, Naomi Osaka. I wanted to ask you about her because she's back, and there was that glimpse at Roland Garros where she was playing phenomenal tennis against Iga Swiatek, had the match point. And in my mind, I still think every time I now see her name, for in a match, and I see that she's playing someone, I just think in my head, how would her season have gone differently if she'd won that match? Because I do feel like these types of matches, they can be a real catalyst, right? And she hasn't quite had that big marquee win. She's beaten some really good players, Ostapenko, for example, and players like that. That's fantastic. But she hasn't had that really big win where you think, wow, okay, like, that's it. You're back to near your best. And it's interesting because on the ATP tour, there were some players, for example, like Dominic Thiem when he came back from, and his was injury, of course, but he had some really close ones against like Tsitsipas, who at the time was playing really well. And you think, oh, he's getting so close, he's going to beat him, and that's it. That's it. The catalyst for him to then go on and become that beast that he was before, and he didn't quite make it happen. But I'm hoping for Naomi it's going to be different. It hasn't been injury. Obviously, she had a child. She's come back, and she's still quite young as well. So, I mean, she's younger than me, so she's very young. So what's your thoughts on Naomi and how she's looking and shaping up, and like, what are your hopes for her?
I think Naomi's looked great thus far in Beijing. She recently split with her former coach, Wim Fizet, which I'm very happy about, because I honestly felt like Fizet didn't make a lot of progress with Naomi's game. He was just running to the same issues, and I feel like she needed to really evolve and adapt with the times. there's just a few issues with her game, notably like her returning, shot tolerance, and I've noticed both those areas especially have been significantly improved in Beijing. And I think that Patrick, even though they've only been together, this is their first tournament together, he's done a pretty good job thus far. And you could argue, yes, it was his impact of like what he's actually been telling Naomi, but I also think just it's a mental thing with Osaka, having someone else in her behind her, like, and knowing that Patrick is accomplished and has coached Serena to like 10 Grand Slams. I think that helps a lot with her and giving her the belief that she can problem solve through these matches and that she can hang in there in rallies. It doesn't have to go for a kill shot after the third attempt. And I've noticed that she just has more of a calmness about her. She doesn't really kind of self-destruct, which is what I've kind of noticed in her previous losses. So I think specifically in talking about Beijing, the win over Yulia Putintseva was very important for her because it was her first come from behind win after dropping the first set in a very long time since Miami Open 2022. And I think that'll do wonders for her confidence in knowing that whenever she is, her back is against the wall, she has that win behind her, that recent win, and knowing that she can come back and find a way through these matches. So this is very, very promising for her. And I know she has a difficult match coming up against Coco Gauff, who's the 4th seed. Their head-to-head is tied at 2 apiece. So, and their last match was over 2 years ago. But I think this will be Osaka will be seeking her second top 10 win since the comeback. You mentioned earlier that she beat Yelena Ostapenko at the US Open. If she's able to get this win over Coco, perhaps that might be the match where we say she's back. As you mentioned earlier, she wasn't able to get that win over Iga at Roland Garros, but I think Coco will provide a much greater challenge than Yelena Ostapenko because she's more consistent and she'll be able to incorporate more variety than Ostapenko was. So it'll be very, very intriguing to see how Osaka will handle this recent upcoming challenge.
Yeah, I agree. I think the style is definitely tougher for her than someone like Ostapenko because with Ostapenko, it's a shootout, right? Ostapenko has that crazy stat when I was at Wimbledon and we were sitting down talking to her, and one of the stats was that she had run the least out of all the women, but she'd made, I think it was the quarterfinals at the time, and she was just absolutely killing the ball, and she was hitting a crazy amount of winners, and that's the way that she plays, super aggressive. And Naomi does play an aggressive style of tennis as well, so there's winners galore. But it was who's going to blink first in that one. Whereas I feel like with Coco, she's just so consistent from the baseline, and she's got, as you said, that variety as well, so she can frustrate Osaka. So Osaka needs to be a bit more patient and measured in the way that she plays against someone like Goff. And it's going to be really interesting to see because I was watching their matches actually today, and because I was thinking about doing my a preview for it, and when I was looking at it, I was just thinking, Osaka, like you mentioned, was super calm in all the matches, very calm generally, and when she played Goff, especially at the U.S. Open. It was US Open 2019, and she beat Goff, and then Goff beat her at the Australian Open in 2020. So they played each other in only a few months' time, right? Like back to back, in back to back Grand Slams, and they split the wins. And Goff was very young at the time, and you have to think that Osaka's in her prime. Like when we say prime, like that's the best level that we've probably seen from her, right? Because those are her Grand Slam winning years. And Goff is a baby right then. She's a baby, and she's managed to beat Osaka. So that puts her in really good stead when she comes up against. And clearly, her style, I think, is a little bit difficult for someone like Osaka. So this would be a really big win, I think, if she does get it, and it'll be a fantastic match, I'm sure, on show. And given that she's playing some really good tennis, as you say, Osaka, I mean, great to see her back. I don't think anyone hits the ball like her on the women's tour. Just the sound that comes off the racket is just unique. It really is. And I remember watching the Iga match and just, I'm a fan of Osaka's, no doubt. But I almost felt myself becoming like a super fan when I was watching that match because I was getting so excited of the prospect of her beating Iga on clay. It was like, whoa, this is that's why you become a tennis fan, I think, because you have those types of matches and moments, and it was crazy. So I'm very much hoping she does get that marquee win and she can push on because the sport And I think the women's tour especially will be better for her. I mean, can you imagine her at her best, and then you've got Sabalenka, and you've got, you got Rybakina. Hopefully, he's going to be back as well soon and back to her best, and Swiatek and Pegula and all these girls now coming through. It's incredible to see. Yeah, I mean, what do you think in terms of Osaka? I'm assuming then you think that she's capable of winning slams at some point again. I mean, what's your thoughts on, if you were to guess when she's going to win a slam next? Do you think it's going to be next year? Does she need a bit more time? Like, what's your kind of hopes and predictions on that?
I know it's kind of early, and I might be reading a little bit too much into her Beijing form, but I think it's very promising this week, to where I think she can definitely win a slam. I'd say more 2025 U.S. Open will be where we would really kind of consider her a strong slam contender. 2025 Australian Open, you never know, because she might not be seeded for that in time, but still she could be dangerous, of course, as an unseeded player. But yeah, I think before I was a little bit doubtful, just honestly speaking, because of these recent losses, and I felt like it was more of a mental thing than anything else, especially the loss to Muhova at the U.S. Open. That's another thing. She was one of the players who pushed Muhova the most en route to the Czechs' run to the semifinals at that tournament. You could argue that if Naomi converted one of those set points that she had in the second set, I think she was up 5-4, 40 love, and she was serving for it. And unfortunately, she kind of like collapsed there at the end. So even that there, she wasn't playing her best there. If she wasn't playing her best there, and she still was pushing the eventual semifinalist Muhova, then if she like really starts hitting her top gear consistently, for sure she'll be able to win. I think not only one slam, but hopefully multiple slams in this latest comeback, I think.
So good news if you're a Naomi Osaka fan, you're listening. Christian said it. If she doesn't win one, don't blame me. Don't blame me. He goes to Christian to blame him. No, I think, yeah, I mean, I'm really hoping she does, because she's so good for the sport, for sure. You mentioned Patrick Mouratoglou. What are your thoughts on him? Because he seems to be another person that tends to divide, I think, the tennis world big time, and he's had his carousel and with Holger Rune on off. More breakups than I've seen in a while, but that was very interesting to see. And they've obviously worked together a lot of time. But then he worked Coco Golf, of course, as well when she was younger. And you mentioned Serena and obviously Serena Halep and others. So he's clearly had quite a lot of success in his career, and he's had some turbulent times as well. And he tends to be a character that not everyone warms to as much, but others seem to love him. And what's your view on him in terms of what he's like as a coach? And like, are you a fan of his, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm actually, I guess, a big Serena Williams fan. That's why she got me into tennis. So I'm kind of familiar with Patrick. Of course, he was her coach. Um, when Naomi initially announced that she was going to be working with Patrick, a lot of people were not pleased. Of course, you mentioned because of the Simona Halep thing, they just thought that he didn't have good ethics, and they felt that he was responsible for her ban. And then also, too, you mentioned like the stint with Holger Rune, how it was kind of topsy turvy, and they were questioning whether he was actually a good coach, or I don't even Renee Stubbs was saying that he kind of struck gold when he was with Serena, because anyone could coach Serena to those slams. I do believe that he's kind of proven thus far in these, I know it's only been 3 matches with Naomi, that he does know what he's talking about. And Naomi even said herself in her press conference in China that she felt the same way, and that was he really a good coach, or did he just coach Serena? But she confirmed that he is indeed a good coach, and he knows what he's talking about as well. And I have no problems with Patrick. I think he's great for the sport, to be honest. He's become kind of like a tennis mogul with his UTS exhibition series, which has become a big success, and hopefully changing the game as well, and bringing more eyes to the sport, as well as his YouTube channel offering coaching advice and to various people. So I wouldn't say I'm like a fanatic, a Patrick Mouratoglou fanatic, but I'm, I guess, a defender, if you would. Yeah, that's more appropriate.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I'm in the same, but I mean, Patrick Mouratoglou is, yeah. I mean, look, he's everyone's going to have their opinions. And I think where I'm sat, I haven't met him in person, but the UTS seems like a really cool exhibition they do, and the players seem to love it, and it's something a bit different. And he's obviously had success with other players, and he has a certain style, right? And that style isn't right for every player, but that's the same with every coach. There's not going to be one size fits all. You know, there's some coaches that will be great with one player and they might not be great with others, and that's just the way it is. And that's because players have different styles. They like different coaching styles and different personalities, and not everyone gels, and that's life, right? So that's just the way it is. And not you don't have to love someone and really warm to them to have respect for him, right? And I feel like he's definitely someone to be respected. And you know, he's an interesting one because the way that he coaches, from what I can tell, is very motivational in the way that he is. And I feel like you mentioned previously that with Osaka, it's really important that she has someone, or that she stays mentally strong, right? A lot of her shortcomings, I think, in the past have been her, you know, whether she's able to kind of, I guess, not beat herself up on court, and really stay mentally tough and stay resilient, and then get through those tough moments. And that's when she's at her best, when she's calm and she's mentally strong. And I feel like he's someone that will probably be able to feed into that and lean into that aspect of her game. And he obviously knows his stuff technically, but I feel like she has obviously a lot of very technically strong areas, especially from the baseline and serve, etc. And she's got some incredible tools at her disposal. Can he add some other things like coming to the net? And it's interesting because I saw a lot of comments about people saying that she needs more variation, needs to come to the net. I think it was actually on one of your Instagram posts where you posted her practicing, I think it was. And yeah, and I was thinking in my head, like, oh, actually, that might be true. Like, she doesn't really come to the net. She's obviously a power baseline. That's really her game. But then I was watching her matches today against Goff, and she actually was coming to the net at times. And it was interesting. And she was volleying pretty well. And I was thinking, okay, well, actually, maybe people need to watch her matches more, because you know, highlights are highlights, but actually, when you watch a full match, it's a bit different, and you get to know what's going on. And I think, you know, she needs to definitely, as she's getting older as well, and she'll have to continue to develop her game. She can't just play one way, and she needs to add small things, as all the great players do. She's won 4 slams, so she will do that, I'm sure. And she seems very willing to learn. She clearly is putting in the hard yards, as mentioned. She was obviously very disappointed, putting out, you know, a really long post saying that she's putting in the hard work. It's not quite paying off, but she's going to stay patient and trust the process, and hopefully it'll pay dividends. So look, I mean, I think he's a good person to have in her corner to motivate her and keep her on the right path mentally. So let's see whether it's fruitful or not. But so far so good, as you mentioned, for sure. On on other people, I mean, Holger Rune is quite an interesting one. I want to ask you about him because as a player, he's quite, you know, I talked to him at Wimbledon, and he seems really mature in the way that he speaks. I think he talks really well. He clearly is competitive, and he wants to do well and be successful, and it hasn't quite worked out for him. He had a pretty good Beijing, made the semi-finals, of course, and really tight loss to Arthur Fields today in straight sets, but 2 tiebreakers, which, you know, could have gone could have gone either way. But what's your view on like his season? It's been a pretty turbulent one. Well, what do you think he needs to do to get back on track?
Yeah, I was actually having like really like some interesting thoughts while watching Rene's match in his against Feast in Tokyo today in the semifinals. But like I was wondering whether, because he's had such a strong end of his 2022 season and a solid 2023 season as well. And before Sinner won his slam, I remember there actually talks about really it was just Alcaraz and Rune being the top 2, and Sinner was facing a lot of brunt and disrespect low key. But now it's like completely different. Sinner has kind of for sure surpassed him. I know that Sinner is a little bit older than Rune, but I honestly can't help but think whether Holger might fall in the same conversation ultimately as like a Tsitsipas of being really solid, but not being a consistent slam contender. And I think that's very unfortunate because I think he could be really great for the sport. Like he's so funny actually when you follow him on social media and Twitter. Like he's very engaging and interactive with the fans, and he is a little bit shady sometimes too with like the U.S. Open and talking about how he feel like he shouldn't be playing on outside courts and stuff like that. But I feel like tennis needs personalities like that, to be honest. So I guess I'm a Holger Rune supporter too. But I think he's also kind of not. He's kind of reminds me of Djokovic because he's not afraid to kind of antagonize the crowd, and he did that in the quarterfinal against Kei Nishikori a little bit, kind of trying to engage with the home crowd there. I think he for sure played better in Beijing. It's weird because he played strong in Cincinnati. He made the semifinals there. You could argue he should have won that match against Tiafoe to advance to the finals. And then he played pretty poorly against Brandon Nakashima in the U.S. Open first round. And then he played again strong here in Tokyo. But I think the biggest thing for him is being able to bring it consistently at the slams and having that big breakthrough moment. We really kind of haven't seen that from him yet. So I think that's really his focus of trying to bring it to the best of fives, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. I think he struggled a little bit physically, I think, with getting through that, and maybe the mental side as well, because I feel like he maybe hasn't quite matured at the same level as Sinner and Alcaraz. I feel like he was there in 2022, as you said, and then he hasn't quite kicked on as people thought he would. And I think the coaching instability hasn't helped. I think he needs to just stick with someone, and I mean, he needs to stick with someone and also understand and really become comfortable with the type of style he wants to play. I feel like it can sometimes be confused at times, and he's so talented. There's no doubt about that, and it would be a real shame. And this is no shade or no offense to someone like Tsitsipas, but Tsitsipas might still win a slam. But at the moment, it's looking like he's not. He's tracking to go slamless, and we don't. And personally, I don't want, like you, Holger Rune to be in that same bracket, because I feel like he is a great personality, as you mentioned, and he's someone that he's funny. He clearly has not just a big game, but a big character as well, that I think is really good for the sport. And he's also someone that I do think he can challenge the Sinners and the Alcarazes, and we've seen that he's beaten them in the past, and he's beaten Djokovic, for example. So he clearly has that ability. It's about stringing it together and keeping consistent and continually improving his game. I think there's clearly a few technical holes in his game and things that he needs to improve upon. So he's got the athletic ability. It's just whether he can really piece it together, and I'm hoping he can, because he's an all court player as well. He's gone deep at Roland Garros and Wimbledon, for example. So he clearly has the ability to make moves. It's just a question of can he. I think he maybe needs to get another big win over one of those guys, and then that probably gives him confidence as well to say, I can kick on again. So it's interesting because a lot of players are confidence players, right? We say that in some other sports, they're confidence players. And I feel like in tennis, especially, it's individual sports. So I feel like even more so it is, you be a big player and then that's it. It kind of catapults you a little bit and you think, right, I can do this. And his first round match, I think, against Nakashima in the US Open, was a pretty tough matchup, I have to say. When I saw the draw, I thought he could lose. And Nakashima was playing some good tennis at the time, and he's a good player. I mean, he won the next gen finals as well. I think it was last year even, or the year before. So he's a good player, and maybe hasn't kicked on as people expected as well, but he's very talented. So there's a lot of young Americans coming through right now. As an American, actually, so how long do you think it's going to be until a American male or female wins a slam?
Female, there's obviously more hope for the women. I think there's more depth on that side. As far as Coco, she's now, I guess, the second ranked behind Jessica Pegula. So I'm not too worried about the American women. But as far as American men, obviously it's a going on now 21-year drought since since Andy Roddick won the 2003 U.S. Open. I think that there is a chance for sure that it ends rather sooner than later. It'll be tough for sure with Sinner and Alcaraz, and even Zverev too. He's playing better I don't know if he'll be able to kind of conquer his own inner slam demons and go all the way. But Sinner and Alcaraz have kind of proven themselves to be kind of a step above. Although Francis Tiafoe, he came close to beating Carlos at Wimbledon this year in the third round, actually. And I think that while he did fall short to Taylor at the U.S. Open, I believe that he has it in him, at least in the next 2 years, to potentially go all the way. I think that he will learn a lot from that loss. Taylor himself, I think he has the game to for sure consistently push through and put himself in the positions to win a major eventually. I think that it'll also probably have to take something like maybe Alcaraz, of course, and Sinner being off their game, or maybe maybe the center ban coming during one of the slams potentially. But I for sure think it's a possibility within the next 3 years. I think that, and will it happen in the next 3 years? If I'd have to say yes or no, I'll say yes. Actually, I'll say yes. I'll predict that an American man will win a slam in the next 3 years.
Well, the next 3 years, okay, fine. That's going to be interesting. I'm going to be waiting. I'm only waiting. I think, yeah, obviously on the women's, like Coco Gauff won it recently, but it's interesting to see. I mean, whether I'm assuming she's going to win more, right? At some point, it's just a matter of when. I probably should have said anyone other than Coco because I feel like she's kind of a given. Right? I feel like Pagula and the other girls are coming through Navarro, but yeah, for the men, I think it's interesting because people are saying with Alcaraz or Sinner need to lose early, or with the banner you were saying, and I think people have to realize that they could be injured as well. Like someone could be injured. Alcaraz, for example, missed the Australian Open last year, and Sinner as well. He could retire. I think he retired one of the slams as well a couple of years ago, and that could happen. Or as you mentioned, the ban, or even just someone loses early, like Alcaraz at the US Open, and then you do get a finalist that either hasn't ever been in the final before, or maybe they have, like someone like a Zverev, but they could potentially do something in that final because someone like Zverev is quite dangerous, someone to Alcaraz or Sinner, and he's beaten them in slams, in the last couple of years, so he's capable of doing it. But I think we're definitely going to get new Grand Slam finalists like we did at the US Open, especially next year. I mean, I don't see Sinner and Alcaraz being in every single final. I think that's unrealistic. So could they split the slams again? Yes, but I think we're good. They could do it, but we'll see whether they can pull it off. But I think we'll definitely get some new Grand Slam finalists. I think I'd be surprised if we get the same, Medvedev or Zverev, for example, in a final. I think the other guys need to push on and really make the most of it. And Fritz did that. He took the opportunity, and then with the American guys, there's just so many of them. So it's like, come on, guys, you can do it. You've got so many. I mean, Korda as well coming through. Korda, he's one of my favorite Americans. I just love his style. I think his body is his real issue. He just breaks down constantly, and I think that's something that he needs to obviously figure out. But if he stays fit for a stretch, I think ability-wise, I actually personally think ability-wise, I think he's got the most ability out of all the Americans. That's in terms of just raw ability, that is. TFO, as you mentioned, has got incredible ability himself as well, and very entertaining. I think it'd be great if he was able to kick on, at least make a slam final, because he's such a big personality in the sport. Everyone seems to obviously love him, not just outside of the locker room, but inside it as well. Doesn't seem to be a single person that can say a bad thing about him. And then you've got others like Nakashima I mentioned, and Mikkelson's coming through as well. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of them. Tommy Paul, didn't even mention him. I mean, he's such a good junior, and he's been able to put on some really good displays against some top players, and probably an all-court player and someone that you could argue should be doing slightly better than he is as well. I mean, he's got kind of well-rounded game, but maybe doesn't have that big weapon that some of the others do, like Fritz. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that one of them will win a slam in the next 3 years. If I was to guess who would win it first, I would like DFO to do it. I just don't know whether he's got that. I don't know. It's something about. I just don't know whether he can he go 2 weeks and like just blitz people. I don't know, like whether he'd kind of fall to at the end. But I don't know. It's difficult actually because I can't actually mentally picture any of them winning it. Well, what about you? What do you think? If you
I actually have, I think Ben Shelton will win a slam.
Oh, Shelton, of
Um,
course, as well. I didn't even mention him. Yeah.
yeah, I think he'll win a slam. I think Wimbledon or US Open or even those three at least, he has great shots at doing so. Roland Garros would be very difficult for him because it's on clay, of course, but his big serve will get him through a lot, like especially on faster surfaces like the grass. And it'll be obviously he needs some things to kind of hone in his game, perhaps like shot making decisions and things like that. Maybe he needs another voice in his box, experienced voice in his box aside from his father. But I think he has a great opportunity at doing so. He came very close to beating TFO in their third round at the US Open, which was one of the best matches of the year. So you could argue if he had done that, if he had beaten TFO, could he have gone all the way to the final even? So I think he has a great shot. TFO, the thing with him is that he even mentioned at the US Open is that he struggles to kind of get up for the other tournaments and the other slams as he does the US Open. And the US Open is his best tournament. He's made the semifinals the last 2 years and quarterfinals the last 4 years, I believe. So that'll be his biggest challenge. I think with Fritz, he's kind of gotten that monkey off of his back of not progressing past the slam quarterfinal. So I think that he'll for sure he might be the most consistent now out of them all as far as going deep in the majors. You mentioned Tommy Paul for sure. I think he has a lot of talent. It's just the fact of, I mean, Tiafo and Fritz run into the same issue too of just when it comes down to facing a center and an Alcaraz, he simply isn't as good. It's just this is the facts of the matter. I don't think he has quite the weaponry to rely on as a Shelton does with his serve to trouble them or to beat them at the majors. But yeah, I think long story short, I think Shelton will I don't know if he'll be the first, but I think he'll for sure win a slam in his career. So I guess maybe I'll go ahead and say he'll be the first. Yeah, I'll say that.
Nice. Yeah. I think it's funny actually. I completely forgot about Shelton because there's so many of them. But yeah, I mean he's a phenomenal talent as well. It's interesting you said about Tommy Paul and playing Sinner and Alcaraz because I feel like with what happens in those matchups is that against pretty much everyone else, in terms of athleticism, he feels like he's able to be more dynamic than them, and he can actually he can outrun them. He has more variation than a lot of the players, and he feels like he's really in that match with them. He can outmatch them in certain aspects, especially with that athletic ability. But when it comes to Sinner and Alcaraz, it's different because they outmatch him in that, and that's one of his biggest. That's one of his biggest abilities and attributes that he has in his toolkit. So it becomes really tough, and they out hit him from the back of the court as well. And he feels like he's like, what do I do? And it's funny, I was watching him live against Alcaraz at Wimbledon and courtside, and and it was almost like he just didn't know what to do. Like he was struggling to come up with a game plan. And it's interesting because on certain surfaces he does give Alcaraz fits, or at times, and we've seen it. But on a hard court, for example, but I feel like on grass he was struggling to figure out like what to do, and Alcaraz took over. So it was really interesting to see. And after he was just saying, I need to serve better. But I thought it was, obviously, first serve is key in men's tennis. Everyone knows that. But I do think it was a little bit more than that. I feel like it was almost a feeling of I'm being outplayed here. I don't know what to do. I can't problem solve because I don't think I've got the arsenal to be able to actually change tact. Whereas, like you were saying about Shelton, and Shelton's got a massive serve, but he's also got really good hands in the net. Tommy Paul does as well, but I think he can rely on the serve, and then he's got power from the back of the court. He's a little bit more inconsistent, of course, than some of the others, but he's got the X factor, which means that he's got the weaponry, like you mentioned, to actually trouble these guys. And we saw that really good match exhibition, but still a really good match against Alcaraz at the Laver Cup. And he's not quite developed as much as those guys, but he's going to get there. He's going to get there. He seems hungry. He seems like he's got a really good partnership with his dad. He brings a different style to to tennis, and he seems to love the sport. And being a lefty is a massive advantage. And if he just leans a bit more into that leftiness, which is a bit weird thing to say, but if you watch Jack Draper play, he does that. Like he as good a server as Shelton is, like I still think his slice serve can be better. which sounds crazy to say, but like for that lefty slice serve out wide, and he'll get there. And I agree. I think he'll definitely win a slam. And I think Wimbledon is a really good shout. And if he can just learn to move on the grass, because the movement's going to be the biggest thing for him. Once he figures out how to move on it well, it'll be really difficult to beat him because he's got a very, very good game for grass. So I expect him to do well there. And hard courts, of course, he's going to do well. Roland Garros will be tough, I think, but who knows? Crazy things have happened. Medvedev won Rome, so who's to say he can't? Who's to say he can't? On the women's, then, like, what do you think? Like Jess Pegula and stuff, and Emma Navarro, and these girls coming through. Like, what do you think? Can they follow? Can they follow Coco and win a slam as well?
Pagula for sure can, and so can Emma Navarro, I believe. I think Navarro has more of a ceiling because she's still rather new on the circuit, and she, I guess, has more, not only more time, but I believe she has more areas to where she can improve her game for sure. Pagula, for sure won't hurt, and of course, making a slam final, and if she does happen to make another slam final, it'll help her in having that experience. But she is 30 years old at least, so you could question whether she has a few more years left on the tour. There also is like the motivation aspect, and she might want to be like Danielle Collins and start a family eventually, of course. So for her, I think it'll be, even though she's higher ranked and she currently is better than Navarro, it might be a little bit harder for her in the long run to win a slam. I'm trying to think about other players because, Danielle Collins, she's retiring. The
Dollar hides and stuff, don't you? I think.
Yeah, Caroline.
Yeah.
I don't. And Amanda Anisimova, I think, is a
Yeah.
great player, and she's
very good.
coming back. I think if she can, I don't think injuries were as much of an issue for her. She took that long hiatus due to obviously kind of low-key burnout. I think she has a great shot at winning a slam. She has the talent for sure, and she's another player who I think that if she can rack up a lot of good results, it will be great for the sport because I feel like she also has a good personality and she could get a good following too. So that's definitely one to look out for too. And she's still alive in Beijing, and she'll have an interesting round of 16 match herself where she takes on Qinwen Zhang. And she'll be looking for revenge against Zhang too, as she lost to the Chinese woman at the US Open in the first round there. So that's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, tough matchup, and Zhang's been playing really well. But Anisimova's got, we were talking about Shelton, and she's got weapons, right? So she's got massive game, really powerful. And, I actually managed to talk to her at Wimbledon as well. I watched in qualifying because she lost in the final round of qualifying to Eva Lise. And it's interesting because, what I spoke to her after a second round, like win and qualifying, and she's really good to talk to actually. And she clearly has this kind of thought in her mind, and I guess perception of herself that she is good enough to be able to go deep in slams and win slams, because they were asking about what does it feel like to be at qualifying, and she was saying, it's great, but I want to be in the main draw. That's where I want to be, right? Because yes, I've come off a long layoff. That's why, but this is my first time playing qualifying, and it was almost implied like, and there's a reason why, right? Because of her ability. And obviously she didn't make the main draw this time, but she was there at the US Open, and she's had some really good results since Wimbledon as well against some really top players. So it's great to see her back to near her best, and hopefully she can kick on, because I feel like she's really dangerous. And if she can get up the rankings and start and go up the seedings as well, that's where it's going to be interesting, because then it opens up the draw for her. She gets easier first, second, third rounds, and then she can go from there. And I think she's the type of player that when she builds momentum, she'll be really dangerous. So, she's got massive serve. She took me out of one of her slice serves at Wimbledon when I was watching courtside. So, at qualifying, because like so close, but she's phenomenal talent. So it'll be great to see her kick on as well. So really good shout there. Also talked to Katie Volynets as well. I don't know if you've watched her play much, but she had a good win recently as well, and she's got beat Kostyuk, and it was in Beijing. But she's a good player. She's a good player.
Yeah, Katie is a solid player for sure. I think one thing that she'll definitely I think she'll learn a lot from this recent match against Naomi Osaka, which she lost 3-2, is that I guess, developing more weapons in her game. Naomi kind of honestly took the racket out of her hands because of her power, and a lot of times volley net shots just landed a little bit too short. So I think that that's something for her to hopefully improve on. And then in addition to volley net, someone that reminds me of her actually when you said that was Eva Jovic. She won the wild card into the US. She won the girls 18 nationals, and she surprised me by how well she played. I believe she's only 16 years old too, and she nearly I guess beat Ekaterina Alexandrova at the US Open in the second round when they played there. She's definitely one to keep an eye out for sure. Eye out on too. I don't expect that many things that much from her in the coming tournaments because she still is so young and she has needs time to develop her game. But years down the line, I can for sure see her making some noise in the big ranks.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's always great to see these young players come through. Like even in the UK, we saw like there was this 15-year-old and a Klugman who beat Kvitova, Brenda Kvitova. Sorry, it wasn't Brenda. It was Linda Kvitova in qualifying, and she made the final round of qualifying, and she lost to Alicia Parks in the end. And I mean, actually, that's a good. That's a good shout as well. I mean, Alicia Parks. What are your thoughts on her? I talked to her, and she seems like she was on a pretty bad losing streak, and then she picked it up. Midway through this year, and now she's playing some good tennis. And what are your thoughts about where's her ceiling at? Because it's difficult to know. She was seeded, and then she hasn't quite kind of kicked on and made deep runs at slams, etc. Like, where do you think her level's at?
I think Alicia has a lot of potential. She obviously has a huge serve, and that was something that impressed me so much by her, especially in Beijing, watching her first round match win over Wang Qiang there. Just it's very honestly, I hate to make comparisons, but it's honestly very reminiscent of Serena Williams and how even on her second serve, she was acing a lot. I think that a lot of people have been expecting things from her ever since she made her little run in late 2022, and then she won her maiden WTA title in Lyon. But she's just been struggling a lot with just consistency, and she does kind of have like a high risk game. And I think her biggest issue is shot selection and going for the right shots and not going for kind of the riskier shots, especially in crucial moments of the matches. She had a great opportunity, I believe, to go deeper here in Beijing. She was leading Magdalena Freck 4-1 in the opening set, and she lost the opening set. And I think that it's matches like those that can make the difference in your season. So I think that really, I think she needs a good solid coach. I know her father right now is, I guess, coaching her, and that helped her a little bit in the year, or like in the around the grass swing. But I think she needs a really solid coach to kind of work through some of her issues. I think she does have technical issues as well, like with her forehand, for example, and other things like that. If she can get a good coach, for sure, I think that she can rise and really be make a name for herself.
Yeah, no, I agree. She's got a powerful game. Just needs to, keep it together, I think. And hopefully we'll see her make some deep runs again, which would be great to see because she's a really good personality as well. And when I spoke to her, I think she spoke really well, and she clearly has like a really good head on her shoulders. So yeah, amazing. Yeah, thanks so much for the chat, Christian. Is there anything you want to chat about before we wrap up? Because I've held you for a long time.
Oh no, I've been enjoying it. I guess to wrap things up, we can look forward to I guess focusing on the ATP because the women still has a lot left to go, but in Beijing, but the ATP we're kind of getting in the business end of things. In China, the semifinals are tonight or tomorrow morning with Alcaraz and Medvedev, and then Jannik Sinner and a new face, Unchate. Oh my gosh, I had his pronunciation correct, but I don't want to butcher his name. I'll say Boo. Ah, it's slipping me the correct pronunciation, but Boo had an incredible. He's been the breakout star of the Asian swing
Yeah.
thus far, and kind of low key you argue came out of nowhere. I first saw him play at the U.S. Open where he lost to Casper Ruud in straight sets, but he made the semifinals of a tournament in Hangzhou last week, and then this week he scored his first top 20 win in the round of 16 in Beijing against Lorenzo Musetti, and then now his first top 10 win over Andre Rublev, which is very impressive for sure. I'm intrigued to see how he'll do against the best Jannik Sinner. It'll be a great moment for him regardless of what happens. He's only 22 years old too, so I could see him being around there for sure. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Beijing?
Yeah, Beijing's been really interesting. I think, obviously, the usual suspects, but yeah, Boo's been great to see break through, because clearly, it's always good to see home talent, kind of unexpected home talent come through and then really kick on, and you don't know what they're going to do from there. I mean, it was great to see Jerry Shang actually come through and win the title. We interviewed him actually at two different events at Bordeaux. Someone interviewed him, David, from our platform, and then also Anthony at Atlanta. And he obviously made a good run at Atlanta. He beat Shelton there as well. And he's got such a good game. I mean, he's been great to watch, and I'm interested to see what he can do potentially in the Shanghai Masters, which is around the corner now, and only in a few days' time. And he's a lefty, and he's just got a really good all round game, very athletic, explosive, and I mean, when I watched him and I saw him win, I was like, and it happened at the same time as Cilic winning, which was the lowest ranked player ever to win a title, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing! This is peak tennis. This is peak tennis." You got a young guy coming through, winning at 19 years of age. Youngest titleist, I think, 2005, born in 2005, which is crazy. I think it is, and he's won a title. He's the first guy of his kind of era and age to win a title, and then Cilic is just back end of his career, and he's managed to win one. So it was like two very different wins, title wins, but very exciting nonetheless. So yeah, I mean, fantastic to see. But yeah, I've been really excited by him, and I think I think obviously you'll be interested to see Alcaraz and Sinner in the final. We haven't seen that for a little bit. We've seen them in semi-finals, but I'm actually intrigued to see if Medvedev can spoil the party, which he has been able to do recently. So we'll see. I think he's feeling a little bit left out. He's getting a bit of FOMO, not winning these titles. Of course, he hasn't won a title since Rome last year, which is crazy that his last title was a clay court tournament. But I mean, he was raking in titles like left, right, and center, but hasn't won one since May last year. So he's probably due one at some point. But yeah, we'll see. Obviously, Djokovic is back as well, so good to see he'll be back in Shanghai. Do you think he'll qualify for the ATP finals? He doesn't seem to care about it, he said, but I'm sure if he qualifies, he'll play. But what do you think? Do you think he'll qualify? Because he's number 9 in the rank, in the road to Turin anyway.
Yeah, I gotta look at this point, like the specific point breakdown, because I think right now he's only planning on playing in Shanghai, I believe. I don't know if he'll plan on playing in the Paris mass indoors. So, like you said, I think he could care less if he plays or not. I know the only thing on my mind is whether how far his ranking will drop, because he'll be defending a lot of points. I think he went undefeated, I believe, in the finals last year. So that's more points he'll have to defend, and he might drop outside maybe the top 15 or something. And it'll be interesting to see for sure him being seated that low for the Australian Open when that comes around. But it'll be great, obviously, if he does play for sure. But if he doesn't, it's not a huge loss. He's won the things countless times. So yeah, it'll be intriguing. I think it all hinges upon how he does in Shanghai. If he wins Shanghai, he'll put himself in an excellent position, I believe, or better position, of course, to qualify.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm assuming on the women's side, Serena's your GOAT. I'm just going to assume that, because like you said that she's like one of your favorite players. But on the men's side, who's your GOAT? Who's your GOAT?
I mean, it's not up for debate at this point. It's not up for debate. Like, it's Djokovic. It's for sure Djokovic. I think it's hard to debate against him. Maybe he's the greatest right now. I honestly could see. I don't know. It's just hard. I think for sure he'll always have at least that GOAT title because he came up in the era of Federer and Nadal. So even if someone like Alcaraz surpasses the Grand Slam tally count, the Djokovic fans could have a valid argument in saying that he didn't have as tough of competition as Novak did. Obviously, Sinner's a great player himself, but right now it seems to be just him and Sinner. Maybe Holger Rune can rise to their level too. We mentioned him earlier, but yeah, bottom line, Djokovic right now at least is the GOAT.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's undeniable. To be fair, I think you can have your favorite player, or the one that you thought was the greatest in terms of the way they played. But I mean, if you're going to talk about the best player of all time, I mean, it's him, right? So the stats don't lie when it comes to that, and I mean, phenomenal. But yeah, it's interesting what you said about Alcaraz. But if he were to say surpass, which seems mind-boggling, but if he were to surpass that tally, would he be regarded as the best? Because say if Sinner wins less than 10, for example, Rune wins a couple, then is that really as competitive an era? Is Alcaraz just playing phenomenal tennis, like the best ever tennis, or is it a case of actually, what, these guys maybe not as competitive, so maybe he needs other guys to chip in and compete with him to then put him in an era that doesn't look like it's quote unquote weak, which I don't like using because I don't think any era is weak, but people like to use that phrase. But that's actually a really interesting point as well. So yeah, thanks for that. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Christian, for being on. Appreciate it. We'll definitely do this again as well. It'll be good to do it either. Maybe we can do it before a slam, maybe or after, and we can discuss it, some specific points. But it's great having you on. Great chatting.
My bad. Thank you, thank you, Faisal, for having me. For sure, I'm glad to talk tennis with you anytime. It was a pleasure, and for sure, we need to collab again, especially like when a slam rolls around. For sure.
Yeah, amazing. Let's do it. Well, guys, if you haven't already, do go and check out Christian's Court on YouTube. Also, he's very active on Instagram as well. And if you haven't already and you're watching this video, then do like this video and subscribe if you are new, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think of our thoughts. And if you disagree, then that's fine as well. I don't mind. Always like a little chat in the comment section is always good. Sometimes I just see people having a debate amongst themselves and just let them go on with it themselves. But sometimes you just have to, because I don't want to get involved. But normally I like having a discussion anyway. But yeah, thanks so much, Christian. Appreciate it. And yeah, we'll catch up soon. As we said, guys, stay safe and well. We'll see you soon.